Welcome back to Batman Movie Villains. We finally have a new Batman movie out, so it's time to bring back the old Batman Movie Villains series. For the time being though, I'm only gonna make one episode, namely this one on the Riddler. I will make one on the Penguin later once we've gotten his show. I will not be making a video on Catwoman though because, well... First of all, can you really even call her a villain in the movie? This is probably the least villain Catwoman we've ever gotten in a movie before. And second, I just don't really feel like talking about Catwoman again. So, how do we even make these videos? I barely remember. Anyway, who is the Riddler in The Batman? The Batman's Riddler is a deeply disturbed man named Edward Nashton with a very tragic background. Edward is an orphan who grew up in miserable conditions in a poor orphanage. Prior to his murder, Thomas Wayne ran in the mayoral race and, among many other things, promised to greatly improve the city's orphanages. After his murder, though, all of the money that had been invested into these projects was taken by the city's corrupt. As a result, Edward, alongside all the other city's orphans, were completely forgotten. Now things were even worse than ever for them. Meanwhile, all attention was placed on young Bruce Wayne, while the city grieved the loss of the Waynes. As a result, Edward grew to greatly despise the Gotham City establishment and Bruce Wayne. With his enormous wealth and the entire city's love and affection, Bruce was not a real orphan in Edward's mind. As an adult, Edward has become a mysterious figure known only as the Riddler, who seeks to punish the corrupt and show the city the truth of their dark deeds. He does this by publicly murdering city officials and leaving riddles for the Batman to solve that will lead him to the city's dark secrets. In his delusional mind, Edward sees the Batman as his partner in these endeavors. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's basically the Riddler in the Batman movie. Now, what's the Riddler usually like in the comics? Well, he's an incredibly narcissistic man who desperately wants to prove that he's the smartest man in Gotham, and he does this by committing crimes and leaving riddles for the Batman and the police to solve. That gives them an opportunity to stop his crimes before he commits them, giving them a chance to show that they're smarter than him. So yeah, quite different indeed. I knew this even before the movie came out. I mean, you could easily tell by the trailers and by things that Matt Reeves has said about the movie that this Riddler was going to be very different from the one that we usually see. I was not a very big fan of this. I was very worried that they were going to completely ruin the Riddler. But now that I've seen the movie, I don't really care that much about these changes, actually. I mean, this is obviously not the definitive Riddler, and it's never gonna be, but it's a pretty darned great alternate Riddler. And we often seem to get this with Batman villains in the movies. We got it with the Joker in both the Dark Knight and the Joker movie. We got it with Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, and Catwoman and the Penguin in Batman Returns. They often do this with Batman villains. They try to completely reinvent them for the movies. And I've said this before, if your reinvention is actually good, then there's really no problem. It's only when the reinvention is worse than the original source material that you have an issue, because then it becomes a question of why did you try to change this character in the first place when the idea you had was actually worse. Of course, you can always run into the issue of changing the character so much that it's not really the same character at all anymore. I don't really feel that that is the issue with the Riddler in the Batman though. His modus operandi and even his personality to an extent is very much the Riddler. Even his look, well, when he's unmasked, is very much Edward Nygma. The biggest difference from the source material here are his motivations. He's not out to prove that he's the smartest man in Gotham. In fact, he doesn't seem to care about that at all. All he cares about is showing the truth about Gotham's corruption. However, there is one part of his motivations that's very similar to classic Riddler. He wants attention, he wants to be seen. And, just like classic Riddler, he wants this because he has been completely neglected his entire life. It's because he's been so neglected his entire life that he hates the city's corrupt in the first place. So, when you twist it that way, his motivations are actually exactly the same as they are in the comics. For once, we also finally get a movie Riddler who actually leaves riddles and clues on crime scenes for the Batman to solve. We didn't get that in Batman Forever. That movie incorporated the Riddler's riddles extremely poorly. In that movie, he sends riddles to Bruce Wayne instead, and it's for no real reason either. The Batman never quite fully explains though why riddles and ciphers are Edward's tool of the trade. He briefly talks about how puzzles used to comfort him as a child, but we don't get a whole lot more than that. I'm not sure we needed a whole lot more than that though, and the movie isn't told through the Riddler's eyes anyway, it's told through the Batman's eyes, so it would have been pretty hard to squeeze in without it coming off as poorly handled exposition. Given Riddler's motivations in the movie, he actually ends up being one of the most sympathetic Batman movie villains we've gotten so far. Which is kind of funny, because at the same time he's also one of the scariest. Riddler is usually not scary, and I don't necessarily want him to be either, but in this movie it works very well. He truly comes off as a deeply disturbed psychopath. That is a lot due to Matt Reeves' direction, his choices of how to present the character, and of course, perhaps even more so due to Paul Dano's performance. Just how he stares behind that mask, and his heavy breathing, and his mood swings during his rants. He really comes off as a horror movie villain, as a killer from some slasher movie or something. But it's a freaky killer with noble intentions and a sympathetic background. You really gotta give them credit for managing this because it's not easy. Getting your villain to be both sympathetic and terrifying at the same time. Eddie also has a fair amount of pathetic in this movie, especially after being beaten by Batman. The way he just can't accept the fact that his plans have been foiled and that Batman was never on his side to begin with. This is actually very Riddler, as he does usually come off as quite pathetic and a sore loser after being beaten by Batman. So yeah, while we definitely can call this version a sort of reinvention of the character, there is also enough classic Riddler in there. As for the character's visual design, I always talked about the visual designs for the characters in these videos. I mean, on its own, it's pretty bad. It does not look like the Riddler whatsoever. I absolutely hated it when they first released images of it. And I guess I still do if I just look at it as its own thing. But it works in the context of the movie. It's not really something I want to see on comic book covers or made into a ton of different action figures or anything like that. But in the movie, it fits. It fits what the Riddler is in the movie and what he does in the movie. And I absolutely love when the Riddler is caught and unmasked and we finally get to see Paul Dano's face. They really do the build up to his unmasking extremely well. And it sure does pay off when we finally see his face. And this is also when Dano's performance truly begins to shine. His best scene in the entire movie is probably that interrogation scene with Batman in Arkham Asylum. So, if I'm gonna summarize my thoughts here, the Batman's The Riddler is a truly fantastic villain. One of the most memorable movie Batman villains we've ever gotten. He truly does leave a mark on the viewer, and at the end of the day I think that's really the most important thing for a movie villain to do. The worst thing a movie villain can really be is boring. I mean, I can forgive some small issues here and there, like for instance, with Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, he maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But boy is he memorable. The end of the Batman also hints that we're gonna get more of the Riddler. I don't necessarily feel like I need more of the Riddler though. I feel like this movie gave us plenty. I would much rather see a new villain in the next movie. But if he does return, and if he changes a lot throughout the next movie, I guess I'm gonna have to update this video, make another one, a part 2. Anyway, let me know down in the comments how you feel about Paul Dano's Riddler from The Batman. And of course, as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.